Have you ever met someone for just a few seconds and immediately felt that they were trustworthy, intelligent, or unfriendly? Maybe they hadn't even said more than a single sentence, yet your mind had already created a complete story about who they were. What's fascinating is that almost everyone does this. Long before we have enough information to truly understand another person, our minds begin filling in the missing pieces. This happens so naturally that most of us never realize it's taking place. The surprising part is that these first impressions often influence friendships, job interviews, business meetings, and even romantic relationships. But here's the question: if a first impression is formed so quickly, how accurate can it really be? Psychologists have spent decades studying this phenomenon, and their findings reveal something remarkable. Human beings are incredibly fast at making social judgments. In everyday life, we constantly encounter new faces, unfamiliar environments, and unpredictable situations. Instead of carefully analyzing every detail, our minds rely on shortcuts that allow us to make rapid decisions. These shortcuts aren't signs of laziness. They're efficient tools that help us navigate a complex social world. Imagine trying to evaluate every stranger from scratch. Every smile, every word, every movement would require deep analysis. Everyday conversations would become exhausting. Instead, our minds quickly search for patterns that seem familiar, helping us decide whether someone appears approachable, confident, or potentially threatening. This process is often called thin slicing in psychology. It refers to our ability to draw surprisingly quick conclusions from very limited information. A person's facial expression, posture, eye contact, tone of voice, and even the surrounding environment all become tiny clues. Within moments, these clues are combined into what feels like a complete picture. We rarely notice this happening because it occurs automatically. By the time we're consciously thinking about someone, our initial judgment has often already been made. But here's where things become interesting. Just because a judgment is made quickly doesn't mean it's always correct. In fact, one of the biggest psychological influences on first impressions is something called the halo effect. Imagine meeting someone who speaks confidently, smiles warmly, and dresses neatly. Without realizing it, you may also assume they're intelligent, kind, hardworking, or honest, even though you have no actual evidence for those qualities. One positive characteristic creates a halo that spreads across your entire perception of that person. The reverse can happen as well. If someone appears nervous, shy, or distracted, people may unfairly assume they're less capable or less friendly, even when none of those assumptions are true. Think about how often this happens in everyday life. A student who answers one difficult question correctly may suddenly be seen as brilliant. An employee who gives an excellent presentation might be assumed to be a great leader in every situation. Someone who makes one awkward mistake at a social event may be remembered as socially awkward, even if they were simply having a bad day. One small observation can quietly influence how we interpret everything else about that person. This is why first impressions can become surprisingly powerful. Once our minds build an initial picture, they naturally begin looking for information that supports it. Psychologists call this confirmation bias. Imagine you believe someone is confident after meeting them. During future conversations, you'll probably notice moments when they speak assertively. If they hesitate or make a mistake, your mind may dismiss it as unimportant. On the other hand, if your first impression was that they were insecure, you may focus on every pause or uncertain expression while overlooking signs of confidence. The same behavior can be interpreted differently depending on the story your mind has already created. This doesn't happen because people intentionally ignore reality. It's simply how human perception often works. Our minds prefer consistency. Once we've built a mental model, changing it requires effort. That's one reason why first impressions can last much longer than they deserve. Even when new information becomes available, our original judgment often remains quietly in the background, influencing how we interpret future experiences. Interestingly, context also plays a much bigger role than most people realize. Imagine meeting someone at a noisy airport after they've been awake for 12 hours. They seem impatient, distracted, and distant. Now imagine meeting that same person at a relaxed family gathering after a good night's sleep. They smile more, laugh easily, and seem genuinely interested in conversation. Which version represents the real person? The truth is that both are influenced by circumstances. Yet our minds often assume that the first version we encounter reflects someone's permanent personality rather than a temporary situation. This tendency is known in psychology as the fundamental attribution error. We naturally explain other people's behavior by focusing on who they are instead of considering what they might be experiencing. If someone cuts us off in traffic, we may immediately label them as rude. If we make the same mistake ourselves, we're more likely to blame stress, distraction, or being late. We often give ourselves the benefit of context while denying that same benefit to others. That simple difference changes the way relationships begin. A rushed conversation, an awkward introduction, or a stressful moment can create an impression that has very little to do with a person's true character. Yet because first impressions feel so convincing, we rarely question them. We assume that what we felt in those first few moments must have been accurate. But psychology suggests something very different. Sometimes, our first impression reveals more about how our minds process information than about the person standing in front of us. The next time you meet someone new, ask yourself a simple question. Am I seeing this person as they truly are, or am I seeing the story my mind created in the first few seconds? Now here's the surprising part. Although first impressions are formed almost instantly, they are not permanent. Research has shown that while these initial judgments can be remarkably persistent, they can also change when people encounter enough meaningful evidence. The challenge is that this process usually takes far longer than creating the first impression itself. A single glance can shape an opinion in seconds, but changing that opinion may require weeks, months, or even years of consistent experiences. It's almost as if our minds are quick to write the first chapter of someone's story, but very reluctant to edit it later. This is especially important in situations where first impressions carry significant consequences. Imagine walking into a job interview. Before you answer the first question, the interviewer has already noticed your posture, facial expressions, clothing, handshake, and tone of voice. None of these details reveal your intelligence, creativity, or work ethic, yet they all contribute to an initial judgment. The same thing happens during a first day at school, a business meeting, or even when meeting someone's family for the first time. Our minds naturally collect small pieces of information and transform them into a larger story. But psychologists have also discovered something encouraging. As people spend more time together, the influence of first impressions often begins to weaken. Personality reveals itself through repeated actions rather than isolated moments. Someone who seemed quiet at first may turn out to be an excellent listener. A person who appeared overly confident might simply have been nervous and trying to hide it. Likewise, someone who made an impressive first impression may eventually show behaviors that completely contradict those early assumptions. Time has a unique ability to replace quick judgments with deeper understanding. One reason this happens is that human behavior is incredibly complex. No single smile, awkward pause, or confident handshake can accurately summarize an entire personality. Every person is influenced by mood, stress, health, environment, culture, and countless other factors. Think about your own life. There have probably been days when you appeared tired simply because you didn't sleep well, or distracted because something important was on your mind. If someone had judged your entire character based on those few moments, they would have missed who you really are. This is why psychologists encourage us to separate observations from conclusions. Observing that someone speaks quietly is a fact. Concluding that they lack confidence is an assumption. Observing that someone avoids eye contact is a fact. Assuming they are dishonest is a conclusion that may or may not be true. Learning to recognize this difference makes us more thoughtful observers and less likely to misjudge others. Another fascinating aspect of first impressions is how culture influences them. Behaviors that signal confidence in one culture may appear disrespectful in another. Direct eye contact, physical distance during conversations, facial expressions, and even the way people greet each other vary across societies. When we meet people from different backgrounds, our automatic judgments may be based on expectations that don't apply to them at all. Understanding this helps us become more open-minded and less likely to mistake unfamiliar behavior for negative character. Perhaps the most valuable lesson from psychology is not that first impressions are useless, but that they are incomplete. They can provide a starting point, but they should never become the final verdict. Every meaningful friendship, successful partnership, or lasting relationship grows through repeated experiences, honest conversations, and shared moments. not through a few seconds of observation. The next time you meet someone, try something different. Instead of asking yourself, "What kind of person is this?" ask, "What don't I know yet?" That small shift creates room for curiosity instead of certainty. It reminds us that every person has experiences, struggles, strengths, and stories that remain invisible during a first meeting. Ironically, the people who leave the strongest impression on us are often not those who seemed extraordinary at first. They're the ones we gradually came to understand. They surprised us. They challenged our assumptions. They revealed qualities that no first impression could have predicted. Those relationships remind us that people are far more complex than our minds initially assume. So the next time you catch yourself making an instant judgment, remember this. Your first impression may feel convincing, but confidence is not the same as accuracy. Our minds are remarkably efficient at creating quick stories, yet real understanding requires something they cannot rush: time, attention, and genuine curiosity. Sometimes, the greatest mistake isn't making a first impression. It's believing that the first impression tells the whole story. Because in the end, people are not snapshots. They are stories, and no story can be understood from its first page alone. Thanks for watching. If you enjoy exploring the fascinating science behind human behavior, perception, and everyday psychology, don't forget to subscribe and join us for the next journey into the hidden patterns that shape our lives.